PR, or Priority Research Ships, are some of the most powerful ships in Azure Lane, due to the amount of resources and work that the player must do to even unlock them. This is further exacerbated through the need of specific blueprints of the PR ships to raise their limit break level, twice if you include Fate Simulation. In return, you have an SSR or UR ship that, more often than not, makes a great addition to most fleets and does amazing damage against Siren enemies. These PR ships are based on papers of plans for future boats, designs of weapons, or whatever wargaming felt like creating that day. This means that, outside of proposed plans or schematics, or even hulls, these ships never truly existed, though you could reasonably argue the same for ships such as Ulrich von Hutten, Key, or Tallinn. Regardless, the ships were never finished. This has led to some of the PR ships developing, or being given, an unstable mind and personality. Some are more well known and obvious, while others have none whatsoever, or are a stretch to say the least. This video aims to look at and analyze the different mental states and well-beings of the PR ships, and chart them on a spectrum. The leftmost side represents the most sane of the PR ships, while the right is for those who should be in psychiatric care, not a battlefield. This video will go in order from PR1 to PR5, in the order that the ships are displayed on each menu screen. As we go through, I will propose what I believe the PR ship girl's mental illness is, if there is any at all, setting voice lines or character stories wherever possible to base this conclusion. They will then be placed on the spectrum according to how stable I believe they are. I would like to preface this video by saying that I am in no way licensed or trained to be a psychologist or psychiatrist. Most, if not all, of these are educated guesses at best, mainly based on character stories, voice lines, and story interactions. I know most of you who comment don't have the critical listening skills to absorb this information before commenting, but regardless, here's your heads up. Also, this video is mostly for fun, so don't get upset over it, or you're a sad human being. The first ship on the list serves as a good basis for a PR ship girl who's sane and put together, as well as a good example of how some PR ship girls act. Neptune's self-intro line, for example, mentions her background being a light cruiser who only ever existed on paper, and that she has no battlefield experience. Her first secretary line again mentions her inexperience. Outside of her inexperience on the battlefield, Neptune, for the most part, acts like part of the Royal Maid Corps, despite not officially being a member of it, reminding the commander of different things that they need to do, such as reminding them about tasks that are complete or in waiting. However, there does seem to be some reversal in her lines that more so have the commander waiting on her rather than the other way around. Her third secretary line is Neptune asking the commander to brew some of their finest tea in exchange for some of her cake, or commenting on how long the commander takes in her login line. Further straying from her maid exterior is her dominating attitude. No, she's not a yandere before anyone asks. Regardless, her second secretary line of telling the commander to get on their knees and beg, the commission line temporarily allowing the commander to greet other girls who have returned, and her like affinity line of having the commander feed her cake are quite dominant towards the commander. Looking at the other lines, it can be surmised that the reason why she acts this way towards the commander is to express her interest and or love towards the commander. You can't really call having a dominating personality a mental disorder, or that her teasing or dominating the commander is any indication of anything either. The only line, to me at least, that sticks out is the one about temporarily allowing the commander to greet the girls who return from a commission. But outside that, Neptune is of sound mind, putting her well into the left side of the spectrum. Monarch, on the other hand, has an easily identifiable issue compared to Neptune, though not to the point where she needs to be institutionalized. Because Monarch was one of the rejected King George V battleship designs, she has abandonment issues and dislikes the King George V battleships, especially Prince of Wales and Duke of York. Her lines consist of Monarch either trying to prove herself, whether it be to the commander, the King George battleships, or to herself, showing that she is useful or trying to justify her existence. She often questions if she truly belongs to the royal family, if anyone would notice were she to leave, or if she's needed at all. Outside of the self-loathing, she often talks down about Prince of Wales and Duke of York. Though she admits that she does despise them, she can't blame them for replacing her. But she does believe that she is superior to both of them, with rare moments of acceptance towards York and Wales. She believes that Wales would be a good little sister based on her name, and that she may have been York's real big sister if she ever existed. Abandonment issues, despising members of her supposed family, and what seems like some signs of depression puts Monarch further right than Neptune in a zone where she realistically should see a therapist about how she feels so that she can work through her thoughts and feelings towards the others, rather than express those feelings through anger towards York and Wales or believing she is superior to them. Ibuki is cut and dry as well. She either has self-worth issues on top of either being very shy or having social anxiety. Multiple lines state that she doesn't like performing or talking in front of others, and perhaps feeling some safety in the commander's presence, as Ibuki does seem to not be as scared around them compared to others, though she does still get scared when they sneak up on her and does stutter from time to time. She does sort of have a country bumpkin attitude, as she doesn't know how some of the things work at the base or not knowing some larger words. Ibuki also tends to practice her meditation and swordsmanship skills, whether it be because she can be alone or prove herself to the commander is up to interpretation. Ibuki, much like Monarch, should go see a therapist or try and practice being in more social settings so that she can get over her shyness/social anxiety. I'd say this puts her between Neptune and Monarch, as her problems aren't as serious as Monarch's, but she's not free of issues like Neptune. Izumo is a strange case, as it doesn't seem like she has anything wrong with her, and realistically she doesn't. What I would say she is very results/performance driven, maybe indicating she's a workaholic and perhaps needs to take a break or chill out a bit. Immediately after meeting the commander, Izumo says they don't look very reliable, and warns them not to slow her down. Izumo has multiple lines criticizing the commander on either being late, not paying attention, spending too much time talking, and notifying them of completed or unfinished missions. She also talks a fair bit about becoming stronger and honing her blade for battle. Izumo doesn't need to see a therapist, but she does need a vacation or something to take her mind off work and practicing her swordsmanship. This puts her between Neptune and Ibuki in my opinion, as she's decently normal, just very performance driven, to the point where she definitely needs to take a break. Roon is our very first addition to the right side of the spectrum. The amount of things wrong with her are astronomical, to the point where I'm even surprised she's allowed to have a weapon whatsoever. Roon starts off being all innocent, asking for a tour of the base since she's unfamiliar with it, saying she enjoys it and that everyone's nice, as well as giving hugs out to each of the ship girls that return from completing the commission. An overall positive addition to the team at a service level. But as she talks more and warms up to the commander, she reveals that her hobby is quote-unquote granting sweet release. Enjoys seeing beautiful things getting crushed, taking pleasure in sinking enemies, and the pleasure of killing others in general. If her affection reaches a certain point and the commander owes her, her jealousy of the other ship girls boils over, saying that she'll, quote, make them pay. This woman's a psychopath who enjoys killing. There's no other way around it, or putting it. She's not a cute yandere who does it to protect the commander, she does it because she gets a sadistic pleasure from killing and maiming. This is not someone who you trust with a weapon, this is someone who you put in a mental institution permanently because she's a danger to herself and to society. Roon belongs on the furthest right of the spectrum. There's seldom anyone else who comes to be as terrible as she is. Were this a realistic naval base, Roon would be dishonorably discharged or put into a special forces unit where her love of murder is useful. For the final PR-1 ship, St. Louis, we have a French woman. Despite that not being enough to put her in an institution, Louis is your standard religious warrior. She happily aids the commander in whatever they're doing, and believes that God aids her in battle or challenges her. That's not much to say about her in general, outside that she's pretty sane. If I were to make a reach, however, and I'm talking a big reach, it'd be that St. Louis and the other religious-oriented ships perhaps have religious OCD. Believing everything is a part of God's plan, that God either challenges her or is on her side, comparing the naval base to a biblical location such as Sodom and Canaan, and so on. Again, this is very much a stretch, as you'd expect the same things to be said about religious knights in general, but it wouldn't be as interesting if I only said a select few needed help. Based on that assumption that she's a normal religious knight, I'd say she's about the same level of sanity, if not more sane, as Neptune. Both have no issues that I noticed at least, but if she does have religious OCD, it doesn't seem to be harming anybody, so perhaps a therapist or medication to help would help. Continuing to PR2, we have Seattle, another in a pattern of relatively normal PR ship girls. Again, she never existed outside of a prototype for an improvement on the Atlantic-class light cruisers, with both Seattle and the Atlanta-class cruisers specializing in AA, with Seattle talking about how good her AA skills are and her strengthening line. There's, unsurprisingly, nothing wrong with her either. Unless you want to count extreme extroversion as a disorder, Seattle is just a ship girl who likes to party and be social, which there's nothing wrong with. If you want to sketch a fringe theory, you could guess that she likes being social to drink alcohol a lot, meaning that she's a functioning social alcoholic, or that she wants to be surrounded by friends, often due to crippling loneliness. But that's a massive stretch, as she never mentions being lonely or consuming alcohol often. Because of that, Seattle fits snugly into the left side of the spectrum with the other sane ones. Unlike Seattle, Georgia instead enjoys cola and combat, but not to the point of enjoying the violence like Roon. This is probably because of the Coca-Cola Company being founded in Atlanta, Georgia, as well as the class of battleship that Georgia would have been part of having 18-inch guns compared to the 16-inch on the Iowa-class battleships that they were going to replace. Not really damaging to anything but her pancreas, Georgia does appear to have a cola addiction of sorts, enjoying it after battle, praising it whenever she can, and mixing it into other foods and drinks such as chocolate and tea. But that's more of an American thing of enjoying sugar way too much, and I don't think Cola Anonymous exists. As for the enjoying battles part of Georgia, she says that she enjoys battles because it gets her blood pumping, though she does like to relax once in a while, meaning that she likes the adrenaline rush, not the violence. Off to the left side of the spectrum she goes, but not that far left, as she does have an addiction. Kitakaze's issue, again if you can call it one, is how prideful she is. As you know, pride comes before the fall. But that pride appears to be put up as a barrier, as she doesn't like defeat and doesn't think fighting head-on is a strong suit of hers. But yes, outside that, she's just a bit prideful, as she wants to work hard to protect everyone, leading everyone in battle, and keeping a clear head. Left side of the spectrum once again. Azuma is very coddling of the commander, but not as coddling as the next character. Regardless, there does seem to be a slight tinge of self-worth issues, as she often compares herself to others such as Kongu, isn't confident in her abilities to lead the fleet, and often seems to fish for compliments from the commander to get some sort of gratification so that she may feel better about herself. But it's mostly coddling and taking care of either the commander or of other ship girls like Kitakaze. Left side of the spectrum, but not super far left. Friedrich der Große's coddling puts Azuma's to shame, literally calling the commander her child quite often. This is because, I believe, due to a projected infantilism that Fred has. Rather than having a developmental disorder that puts her learning ability at that of a child, she instead believes that everyone else is a child and is in need of her help and support. Though this is not much of an issue, it does possibly lead to something worse, as who knows how Fred would react if she lost a child of hers. Fred is very powerful, as seen in recent events, and she knows that, offering to get the commander anything they wish for, as well as praising those who do their job, and often welcomes the commander into more action with her special touch lines. As she currently is, Fred is a powerful ally to have, but I fear how she'll react if she loses the commander, for example, as the destruction may be great. For now, she'll go into the middle of the spectrum, as she currently isn't a danger, but has the potential to be. Gascogne caps off our PR2 ship girls, and she's quite the interesting one. Similar to Telopsis and Arknights, whom I covered in the previous video, the effects of warpathy on infected characters, both she and Gascogne act like robots or computers, but at the very least, Telopsis is aware of how she's reacting, while Gascogne does not seem to be aware of why she's acting like a robot whatsoever. This leads me to believe that she, like Telopsis, has some sort of schizophrenia, in particular schizoid personality disorder, or SZPD. This puts her more towards where Fred is, towards the middle, but I'd say more left-leaning. She isn't dangerous per se, but she does need medication and help in becoming less robotic and more human. However, she does appear to feel more emotions, specifically that of love, as her affinity towards the commander goes up, with her affinity love line asking the commander to update her, which adds emotions. The first PR3 ship girl, Cheshire, is another oddball, as she often acts like a pet, specifically a cat, towards the commander, literally calling them owner. The repeated cat-like actions, along with the cat ears she has on top of all of her skins, leads me to believe that she has some form of what's known as clinical lycanthropy, where the person affected by it believes that they can turn into, have turned into, or in Cheshire's case, are an animal. She also has quite the attachment to the commander from the get-go. No, this does not make her a yandere. But what contradicts the clinical lycanthropy are a few of her dialogue lines, which either directly state that she is not a cat, can remove her ears as they're just an accessory, and enjoys, quote, fluffing real cat girls from the Sakura Empire. This puts her in a weird position of acting like a cat, but still recognizing herself as a human. Due to this, I believe that she's leaning towards the middle, as this may develop into clinical lycanthropy, but hasn't as of yet, and it poses no danger to herself or to those around her. Mainz, outside of being chronically forgotten by her artists, is a pretty cut-and-dry ship girl to analyze. She just wants to prove herself to her creators as well as the commander, saying this in multiple of her voice lines, as well as criticizing the commander for not getting tasks and missions out of the way when they're done or available, possibly because she feels like it would reflect badly on her as a secretary, and wanting to prove herself is nothing to be concerned of unless she does the anime trope of sacrificing herself, for example. But when it comes to coffee, Mainz is very particular about it, unless you oath her, that is. Now, realistically, she probably is just a coffee snob who enjoys coffee as is instead of diluting it with sugar and milk. But with the fringe theory side of things, it could be a very minor OCD related to coffee, as she wants to make it one way and only one way, with Mainz believing that everything else is wrong. Even if that were the case, it's harmless, so off to the left side she goes. Odin is similar to Mainz in that she's driven by achieving her desired results and particularly proving herself. She often reminds the commander that they're at war, and to stop or have any hesitation would possibly lead to their downfall or loss of the war. She's ready to move on to the next objective after the current one is completed, and often asks the commander what they're planning on doing next. This leads me to believe that she's highly anxious, especially about the unknown or the future. Odin often asks what the next plan is, if there's been a change of plans, reducing irregularities in plans going successfully, and disliking when her plans fail all seem to point towards this. Some anti-anxiety medication, talking to a therapist, or something along those lines would be of good help to Odin, as she may be a better tactician afterwards. This puts her in the left middle section, as were she to have an anxiety attack because a plan failed, this could put her and others' lives in danger. Drake just acts like the person she's named after, Sir Francis Drake, and likes treasure, like a privateer would. She's like Cheshire in the sense that they're both, just playing around, except she's not as at risk as Cheshire in my opinion. Left side. And we end PR3 with another interesting one, Champagne. The majority of her lines have Champagne waxing poetically about herself and the world, seemingly often seeing things in a very black and white manner. Evil and good, desirable and not, and so on. She also allows herself to be directly controlled by the commander, which is further emphasized by the hands in her art, with strings coming out of their fingertips, controlling Champagne like a marionette. This makes me believe that Champagne has some form of depersonalization, derealization disorder, seeing herself as a puppet to be freely controlled by the commander, as well as depression, with some of the things she says being more depressing topics in her dialogue lines. This, I would say, puts her near Fred in the middle of the spectrum, as she does need help with these issues and may result as a danger to herself, or she could just be French. As this video is going on a bit long, I'm just going to bunch the normal cases into one section. For PR4, we have Ägir, August von Parzival, and Marco Polo. Ägir is mostly harmless and just talks big about winning and being all high and mighty. Really, she's just your typical German who enjoys a bit of battle and beer. Left side. August believes herself to be an Unhold, or a type of witch. She's a dominant type who believes the commander is her familiar. Could be seen as delusional, believing herself to be a witch and seeing the commander that way, but with some of the other lines, I think she's just domineering, similar to Graf Zeppelin. Left side. Finally, we have Marco Polo, who acts like Marco Polo. She's more high class and acting like a noblewoman, and she's just more annoying than anything, but harmless overall. Left side. The more interesting cases in PR4 are Anchorage and Hakuryuu. Anchorage either acts like a child on purpose or has the childlike attitude and personality as a default state of mind. If that's the case, then there's a very real chance that Anchorage has some sort of learning disability that gives her the mentality of a child. If not, she's probably doing it and acting like that to get the commander's attention for one reason or another. This places her, if she does have a learning disability, in the middle left to maybe middle right of the spectrum. Hakuryuu, on the other hand, has severe separation anxiety from her katana, to the point of being near inconsolable when she loses it. This allows for anything with her katana in hand, such as the commander in her pledge line, to make her do mostly anything, and she will probably agree to it. As she is powerful, this was a problem, as the katana could be used as hostage to make her attack her allies, middle to middle right of the spectrum. The PR5 ships are honestly the most mentally stable of them all. Quickly listing them off, Prince Ruprecht just has a superiority complex, which is nothing new in Azure Lane, as we have Queen Elizabeth, and she is a bit of a tsundere when it comes to commander. Plymouth might be depressed, as her overuse of rejoice is possibly a sign of forced happiness, but realistically it's either a verbal tic or her being English. Harbin is a tomboy, not a mental issue whatsoever, and realistically there should be more tomboys. Chakalov is just a workaholic. She needs a forced vacation to reduce the stress instead of doing work, drinking, and experiments all day. And Brest may be deifying the commander, but there are others who do a similar thing, so again, not an issue. All of them are either between the middle left and left on the spectrum, and again, not an issue. All in all, there's not many PR ship girls that are on the right side of the spectrum, but those who are need to be closely monitored, as they're either a danger to society, themselves, or both. With the use of medication, therapy, and straight up a mental asylum, most if not all the PR ship girls with problems can be helped in one way or another. Either that, or we can make them worse and make them more effective weapons. Thank you for watching. Please follow my Twitter for updates. I've also gotten back into streaming recently, so come join if you feel like it. Also, please check out my other Azure Lane and Arknights videos as well. The next video will be how eras and countries are shown in the designs of T-Dolls.